Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, welcome to part 7 of a multi-part series on simple web design. In this session, we're going to jump into patterns. So we're going to start with reusable patterns for the site tooling that we chose for this particular website. Now, for our website, starting out UML Operator last year, we went with Google Domains. So we built out a website that helps all of us get to various subjects, topics, videos, talk about it, and then redirect to particular other sites, whether it's Patreon or whether it's our Discord or other sites, blogs, where we're going to have community conversations. In Google Domains, now owned by Squarespace, or acquired by Squarespace, we have tooling so we can create new pages. We are able to, when we create a page, we have tools to be able to add in content, widgets, tiles, other tools during configuration. This is very similar to what we see on WordPress, Wix, and other website designing tools that are out there online for us to use. So as we've been building out this website and the content for this particular series, let's go to the page where we're going to talk about this conversation on web design, simple web design. So we've published a few sessions here from part 1, getting started was kind of an overview, part 2, part 3, part 4. We just left off on part 6. And in part 7, we're going to be getting into patterns. So from our website, we'll be adding our content progression from the website that we're actually building from this session. All right, from our project main landing page here, let's go ahead to this navigation cell and get into patterns. So the first thing we're going to talk about are UI design starter patterns. And in your web cell, you can give it the actual name of the pattern, or you can give it a generic name and then add an alias or something that would make it more meaningful. Let's just start with UI design pattern. This is the convention we're going to use, which is UI underscore, and then the name of the pattern, and then the date it was created. So let's go ahead and double click into it. Into this particular pattern, we're using this extended tool, UI design tooling out of Sparks, with a screen element and 7 UI component elements, 1 through 7 here. So this is a pattern that we're going to save and then reuse as we continue to do UI design versus wireframing. And the wireframing pattern we'll get to in just a moment. Now, as you may recall from part 5 on UI design, let's go ahead and drill into it from our cover page. We used the extended UI tooling, we brought in a screen element, and we brought in some UI elements within the screen. And this got us started. Once you get down to doing this at least successfully twice, now you have something that you may reuse, and we'll call it a pattern, right? So I wouldn't start creating a pattern until you've established some sort of baseline, and then you can make corrections as you're getting into that particular pattern. You don't need to include graphics within your UI patterns or your wireframe patterns, which we'll get into in a moment. I usually just create simple UI elements to handle the conversation as we're going through UI design and we're building out reusable patterns. The same thing applies to wireframe. So let's go to our wireframe work that we did in the last part, and let's go just to the home page. And so when we're looking at this, we built out this wireframe here with graphics, navigation. There's a few elements that are in here that we want to build the remainder of the pages from. So when we go to patterns and we're looking at a wireframe web starter, and again, I could make the alias the actual pattern name. We'll change that in a moment. Well, let's go ahead and double click into it. You can see that we established a reusable pattern here. And for the wireframe, we're going to reuse that pattern, including the graphics. Again, you don't need to bring in the graphics, but we chose to this particular point within the pattern. And that way, when we're bringing in the whatever page we're going to be working on, we're bringing in the look and feel, the theme, just to get us started. All right. So we'll show you that in just a moment as we're building out the pattern. All right, we're going to grab the screen that we want to build a pattern from. But first, let's go to our pattern repository. We're going to add in a package here, which we're going to call UI Design Starter. All right, we can always change the name later if we want. We're going to create a diagram within that. And in the diagram, we want to use the extended UI user interface. Select OK, and now we have a blank with the proper tooling. So we want to grab this element that we want to reuse. So I'm going to select everything that I want to bring in. I don't need that element, so I'm going to control click it. That element, but I want to bring in the logo, the site name, the banner, I think, and I want to bring in the footer. So I'm going to hit Control C. And then I'm going to go over to the blank one. And this is very important. I don't want to hit Shift Insert, paste it. I want to hit Control, Shift, and V, right? You get this paste elements as new dialog. It has all the elements we selected. Let's double check. Yes, I want the home screen and I want these nav elements. And I can always delete anything that I want. Include connectors. I don't need this, but I'm just going ahead and unclick it just in case there's some connections. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I'm just going to select it anyways. All right. Like when I say it doesn't work, I'll have traceability to requirements. And for some reason, I didn't want the connections. So why am I seeing requirements in here? All right. So we have our pattern in here, our screen and our elements in here to start our pattern. And we can come over to notes. We can name this and we can give the diagram name, which we're going to do, the convention that we use for naming our patterns. All right, so we changed the element numbering for our convention. So we've got 1 through 7. This is the numbering that we're going to use. And if you have in your diagram, use alias if available, you can set the alias. If I go to an element and I look at properties, you can set the alias to a unique name that you might have in your content management system repository for these elements. So when you're doing design, you can draw a reference to particular elements that are in your CMS repository. But that's up to you whether you want to do that or not. Sometimes they're very long and not human readable, but you want to have the alias in there or a tag value. You can use tag values. We'll talk about that in later sessions, but just simple numbering to get us started with design. And we named this pattern at the time UI underscore the title of it. We have spaces, usually don't like to do that. I make it camel, but in this case we didn't. And then the date the pattern was created. And then we gave it a name, a description in the notes. Let's go ahead and save this pattern. We are going to go to Specialized tab, Publish Technology, Publish Diagram as Pattern. Now, when you bring it up, your notes that are over here on the right, they're going to pre-populate into the notes section. This is the important part. If you remember in the video, and I'll include the link below, that you want to make sure you name this correctly, UI patterns. If you fat finger it and it's not right, it's going to show up in your repository spelt the way that you meant it, and I'll show you that in a second. This is version 01, 0.01, and because it's the first one. And that's why I create the name of the diagram, the name that I want to use for the pattern. So Control C to copy that, come to Browse, and then I will paste it in whatever that name is, and we'll go ahead and save it. We'll go ahead and step on the previous version. or one that was used for the demonstration. And now we have a pattern. So then when we roll over to resources, you can see that if we right click on patterns, import pattern, we go to the repository where you have the pattern. In this case, it's UI patterns. We're going to go ahead and bring this in. It's going to overwrite the existing. That's fine for this demonstration. And then you can see we have the pattern now saved in our resources that we can reuse as we're going through UI design exercises. The exact same practice will be applied to anything in Spark's modeling that you want to reuse as a pattern. In this case, Wireframe Web Starter. So in the Wireframe Web Starter, I'm going to go ahead and double click it. You can see that we named the diagram, the convention that we want to use. So we can come back over to our navigation cells that people are using. And like I said, you can rename it if you want to, or give the alias name anything that you want. We're going to go ahead and use that particular convention within this cover page for those UI components. All right. So these are tagged out as wireframes versus user design, UI design, because this is UX, user experience. So you may be asking, well, why didn't you call it UX? I certainly could have, but when we come to resources, I could have UI patterns and I could create something called UX patterns. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we've created this pattern that we're going to reuse, and we took it from our wireframing exercise that had those elements in that we wanted to use. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Specialized tab, Publish Technology, Publish Diagram as Pattern. It picked up some simple context that we put in here. And now in the category name, instead of UI pattern, we're going to type UX pattern. And I want to use all caps for user experience or UX patterns. This is going to be 01, 0.01, and I am going to take the name of the pattern, Control C, and then I'm going to go into the repository. Now in my pattern repository, these are UI patterns and not UX. So I'll create another folder in here called UX patterns, and we'll drill down into this folder, and we're going to paste in the name that we used. Now, what we're going to do here, you can do this before or after. We're going to do it after the fact. We're going to change the convention on the fly. So UX, use all the other naming convention, hit save, and we're on the right. We spelled category correctly, double check everything. Good enough. These are the elements we're bringing in. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. All right. So now this is saved off within our repository so that we can import it into our resource for patterns. All right. From the resource tab, we're going to go to patterns, right click on it, import pattern. We created a folder. There's UI patterns, UX patterns. Drill down into it. And this is the one we just saved. And it's called UX in the name of the file. Let's go ahead and import this in. So as soon as this comes in, imports in, it is going to create a folder for us called UX patterns. And there it is, brought it in. And you'll notice the name it picked up of the diagram was UI patterns that are here, right? So for this particular pattern, I'm going to go ahead and double click on it. We can see that we've got everything that we wanted to bring in on the pattern, but it's not named correctly within the repository. So what we're going to do is we're going to rectify that how we would have done it before the fact instead of after the fact, right? But everything else is correct. UX pattern, the name, version 01, brought all of that in there. So let's go ahead and fix the name of the pattern diagram, and then we're going to import it back in. All right, we're back over in our pattern modeling environment, and here you can see we've got the name. We're going to rename this diagram using property to UX, double check it. There we go. Now it's called UX, Wireframe Web Starter, and then whatever the date creation following the convention in here. And if we wanted to go to camel and remove the spaces, we can. But you can see during the import, it wasn't a problem using any convention that you want that's human readable or machine readable, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the Specialized tab. We're going to publish this pattern again, and we're going to make sure that the category is UX. It's got to be perfect, including spaces. Don't double space, otherwise it's going to show up. We're going to take the same name, but let's just hit browse. So we go to browse. Yep, we're going to step on this one because we named it correctly. If we didn't name it correctly, we would fix that. Yes, please overwrite it. There we go. Version is not correct. Now, is this really .02 or 01? I'm going to make it 01 and go ahead and save it now. All right. So make any other changes, double check it. Now what we're going to do is roll back over from the browser window to Resource tab, come up here, right click on this, import pattern, go to where we have our repository, wherever that is, this particular version. And you can see now we've got UX, which is what we want. And we still have UI in here. We're going to delete the UI because we don't want to have duplicate patterns in here just because of the convention. So I'm going to delete this pattern from this resource repository. And now UX patterns, I have the pattern that I want to use for user experience and wireframing. So let's put these in action. All right, so we're doing wireframing for user experience. We're in the right toolbox for wireframing. This is a blank work area here. And we're going to go to resources, patterns, and we're doing UX design, user experience design. We're not doing UI design. So we created this pattern. We're going to right click on it, and then we're going to add the pattern to the diagram. And this is going to put it up in the upper left. We can double check and preview. Yeah, this is the one that I want, blah, blah, blah. These are all the elements that are going to come in. I got the version information, any notes or description I have on the pattern. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. Right, so yes, and it's going to bring in the wireframe, all new global unique IDs. Very important to understand when you're utilizing pattern versus RAS, or the reusable asset, which is going to bring in the GUIDs, the same GUIDs over and over. We don't want to do that. We want separate global unique IDs when we're doing designs because things change and we want to manage them uniquely or independently. So we just brought in including the graphics, and note this, the only reason the graphics are showing up here is because these images are in our image repository. All right, so all the various from the logo to the banner, all of them are in the repository. I'm going to go ahead and close it. If they were not already in the project repository, and of course they are, as we built the pattern in the same repo that we're doing the project, they wouldn't show up. All right, so very important to know that. Now the next thing we want to do is build patterns on the UI tooling that we're using. In this case, we're using Google Domain, now known as Squarespace, or now acquired by Squarespace. And we're going to create patterns for each one of these so that we can drag and drop these into our wireframes. And we did just that. So from the main landing page, these are our patterns. I'm going to double click and open them up. We're going to go to content blocks, building blocks, whatever you want to call these. And you can see that for each one of the patterns, one image, one content, we gave them names that were relevant to the site builder that we were using at the time, which again is Google Domains. It could be WordPress, it could be Wix, it could be so many other tools out there for user experience design that you want. So we're going to look at with each one of these at a time. We could click on them and you can see that as we're bringing them up here, there we go. You can see that this is an image and content. So when we're looking at this one, two images, image, content to the right. This is what we call horizontal, custom image, two images, content horizontal, right? So these are the naming conventions. These happen to be vertical, where you got the image above the content label, and then all the way through. You know, you've got 3 images. Each one of these is a pattern. So let's just go ahead and drill down into this one. So all we did was we brought in a panel because we want to have these as tiles when we're bringing them in separately. We use labels. You can use text or whatever you wish to use to represent it, GUID or the element within your wireframe. These are images. Again, this is an image and this is a label. Brought those in and we painted these out. These are now all built out, ready to go. All right. So let's go ahead back to layer 1 here. And when, just as we did before, we exported using Specialize these out as patterns. And you can see we have UI patterns. And I just did a couple. This one's 1 image, 1 context. Let's go ahead and double click on it and look at it. You can see this is the pattern as it was saved. 1 image, 1 content element. You can look at the next one. Let me hit close. The next one is just a text box. The next one is a different type of text box view with a panel. And then here's our UI starter that we did. So when you're reusing patterns and you're bringing them in, you can just say, hey, I'm going to bring in this one. Drag and drop it in right inside the wireframe. And here's pattern 1. All right. So it's now written in here, and I can come up here and size the widget or the panel, the tile, however your team's referring to these elements. Let's look at this next one. This is just the text, I believe. Oh, this is the footer one. This is the footer. Yep, primary footer. We're going to go ahead and move it down to the bottom. In this case, we were using a label. This is the finished product as we're building that one. And this is a text box. So I'm going to drag and drop this one in. Just hit OK. And then I can size these things at any point, but it's just as fast as that. As you're creating these patterns, it's very fast to reuse them to build out the things that you want to display within your user experience. And then sky's the limit. You go from here, you got all the power of Sparks to start doing requirements development, scenarios around particular widgets. What happens when you click on them? What do they do? You can actually build out the user experience using scenarios, which, as you've seen in previous sessions, can lead to activity diagrams, flow diagrams with an e-commerce site, buy funnels, buy flows, tailoring, personalization. We're going to get into that in more advanced sessions. But that's the power of patterns, how quickly and easy it is to, once you've established a pattern, to reuse them across your project for design, and then eventually other projects as you're going forward. All right, from this project here, from wireframes, UI design, user experience or UX design, to building out how our homepage is going to be laid out, however level of detail that you want to go, reusing patterns to actually build out your wireframe to drive your user experience, your placement and so on, all the way to the actual finished product as you're going through. So in this particular case, here is the finished product from the home page to topics, how we laid out the screens as we were going back and forth in the design for our site, building it out all the way across the rest of the user experience as we're driving the development and ongoing design and development of the website, because it just doesn't stop here. Now, eventually we're going to be going away from using this static to our own dynamic. But as we get more advanced, we'll model out that design, database design, API and logic design, and have a lot more fun as we're going forward. So thanks very much for watching. I hope this was helpful for you. And if you have any questions or concerns, please post your comments down below. Good or bad, it's good to get that feedback to help us understand how we're helping you. All right. Until the next time we talk, happy modeling.